today we're going to be talking a different topic, okay? And maybe for like the next few days, because meta is shifting and all this weird stuff is happening, I'm going to focus a lot on like macro fundamentals, like team fundamentals and like team building that you should like understand and learn if you want to be like a much better player. And in my opinion, what like top tier 2 or tier 2 or sort of owl players understand that like other lower players don't understand. So it's like macro team fundamentals though, okay? So we're gonna talk about mid fights. I always do this. It always defaults to that. Okay. We're gonna talk about mid fights. In my opinion, probably one of the most interesting situations in Overwatch. Right? So mid fights are a lot of chaotic things can happen, right? You're like up 1, you're up 2, and then all of a sudden maybe you're down 2, and then like you lose, or you're down 2, but then you can maybe turn the fight and then you kill things and you win, right? Like a lot of chaotic things can happen, and like it's sort of important to sort of be able to like remain control and sort of like when you have an advantage, make sure you keep the advantage, or when you're at a disadvantage, maybe you sort of understand what to do so that you can like turn the fight and make it in your favor. Okay, so I'm gonna like talk very on the basics, like the straight up basics of sort of like the different situations. So like the first thing is like when we're up. So when you're like up, right? So for example, you're having a fight, a mid fight, and you're up like 1 or 2, right? Like what should you do? Okay. So when you're up, like, let's say, you're up like 1 or 2 and the fight is still happening. Happening. Okay. The thing that everyone thinks about is you need to live. Common sense, right? People are like, oh yeah, you need to live. You need to live. If we die here, we're up 1 or 2. That's just trading, or like it just doesn't make sense, right? So like you need to live. Uh, need to live. The next thing you might want to consider, right, is if you're up 1 or 2, the enemy team might be smart and be like, oh, okay, you killed like 2 people. Let's try and like trade. So the enemy team might try and like kill someone who's easy for them to kill. So maybe like their Winston Tracer will jump your Zen and try and kill your Zen. So sometimes you need to peel. Okay. Now the last thing is a concept that I don't think many people understand, and this is the concept that I think very much separates players, like levels of players, is the concept of understanding how to take the important part of the map. If you are up 1 or 2, you can set up or take important places on the map to give you a positional advantage, which will inherently apply pressure to the enemy team, right? So I just say like like play or like take important, I'm gonna put under here, places on the map. Right? So like, that's like the last thing, and I'll like go into later a little bit, like what does it mean? What's an important place on the map? How do you classify an important place on the map? Like I'll talk about that, I'll give some examples, and we'll sort of like go through that and make sure everyone, gets what I mean by that, okay? But so far it's be very straightforward. When you're up 1 or 2, right, the fight's still happening, just live, right? Like peel if they go on our back line, like our front line to just chill and like maybe set up, right? Our back line can rotate and maybe go play like a really important high ground. And again, I'll talk about that. So the other thing, right, is let's say when you're up 1 or 2 and now fight is over. The amount of times I've seen when a team is up 1 or 2 and a tracer or someone just decides, hey, let's chase this 1 kill. Let's go chase them. Let's go. I'm greedy. I'm going to go for this extra kill. I need to get it. And then they end up dying. Right? And that just doesn't make any sense at all. Like you've won the fight, right? Maybe you're up like 4 or something, right? And the person's really far away and you just want to go for a greedy kill and you end up dying. It just doesn't make sense, right? Instead of this, what you should look at, and I will move my camera in a second, sorry. Make it smaller on the top here. Okay, so instead, right, what you should immediately consider, right, is when you're up 1 or 2 and the fight's over, you should consider this, okay? And it's the same sort of concept where obviously you want to live, you want to not overextend, so don't overextend, right? And then the biggest thing, okay, again, is you want to take the important place on the map. You want to set up in this situation, right? I need a faster thing for this. And in this situation, it's basically like setting up. Okay. Now, the next thing, right? Let's look. The next thing is, let's say you're down. Okay, like this happens. Sometimes you might be down, right? And you're like, okay, I don't know what to do. You know, we're down 1 or 2. It's a weird situation. Like, you know, how are we gonna win, right? Let's say you're down. So when you're down, like 1 or 2, and the fight is still happening. The really, really, really good teams, when they're down 1 or 2, they can still turn a fight and they'll win. And like I call this sort of like winning losable fights is like one example, or just turning fights, and it's like very clear. I'll give you some examples of this, and it's just like, wait a minute, they were like down 1 or 2. How did they win this? Right? And it's like, wow, right? It could be the enemy team made a mistake and you punish the mistake. It could be that, you know, maybe you when you're down 1 or 2, you used an ultimate and you got like 2 kills off that ultimate, and all of a sudden you're even now, right? And tempo's favoring you. So there's a lot of different situations. So the basics of it is you want to look for something. As soon as you're down, right, you want to inherently look for a trade. Right? A trade is essentially, you know, someone killed you on your team, so the enemy team is gonna like kill. Sorry, someone killed you on your team, right? So you're trying to trade the kill, so like you kill someone on their team, and so both kills are hopefully even. Or we'll do, if not a trade, you want to look to back up, okay, to a sort of like smart position, and I'll define this again in a second. Smart position where you can sort of bait the enemy. Where you can bait the enemy team, and then after you bait them, then you sort of like push back into them. Push back into them. So an example of this could be like, maybe, you know, you're on Hollywood first, right? And the enemy team sort of pushes in. I'll give you a visual example. In Hollywood, right? Let's say the enemy team is pushing in here, right? And you're down, and your team decides to kite into here, okay? And you sort of live in cafe, and the enemy team says, "Oh, sure, let's keep going, let's keep going, let's keep going." And they push into cafe, and as soon as they push into cafe, you just punish them, right? So you sort of kill them, you hit them from multiple angles, right? And then you get trades there, and then you push forward, and then now you're even, right? That's like one example, and I'll give like this is an example of using like an enclosed space, right, to like bait them. Another example, in my opinion, is like on like there's like sort of lines and stuff. So like if you look at Temple of Anubis on second point, when you're in like OT situations, right? And like to me there's like a very important line right over here roughly that you want to like be able to like cross, because if you get past these chokes, right, then like when you're attacking, it's much easier for you. Normally, I mean, there's still a choke over here, but like if you're going this way or going here, like it becomes a lot easier because you're able to take the map environment. But let's say, you're on point and you are like fighting the enemy team, so like the fight's happening like here. Whoops. Fight's happening here. And like it's a 6v6, right? And the enemy team uses like some ultimate and it like kills like 1 or 2 of you, right? So then you say, okay, like play slow, we're low HP, right? So then your team says, okay, we're gonna play slow, and they decide to kite, and they sort of kite and they back up to like this cornerish area, and they play really slow here. The enemy team is like, we can kill him, we can kill him, we can kill him, we can kill him, and they chase. And when they chase, they're like, they're split, because normally when teams chase, they're never together. So as soon as they chase and you're sort of stabilizing here, because they're walking through open space, right, you can punish them because they have to use CDs to walk through open space. So that you punish the first person maybe, or the second person, kill them, and then move back forward, right? This is an example of like ebb and flow, right? But it really, really, really applies to mid fight. Okay. Where did There we go. So this is an example of, you know, when you're down 1 or 2, right? The fight's still happening. You can look to back up, right? To smart position, bait the enemy, and then push back in, right? That's ebb and flow. The other way of looking at this also, right, is you can look to trade, right? You're down 1 or 2. Maybe you send your Winston or Tracer to like jump their backline and like kill their Zen instantly. And then maybe get their like Mercy while you're at it, and then like you're even all of a sudden. And while it's happening, your backline stabilizing and living, and then like your backline pushes back in, and then your Winston Tracer's behind them, and you pinch them. Okay. Let's keep going. So after this, right? The next one is sort of obvious, but when you're down 1 or 2, okay, and the fight is over. So now the biggest thing, right, like, is if fight's over, you're down 1 or 2, right? Like it's over, so it all you need to do and realize here that you just need to die. Die on point. Whether that's cart, point, whatever you need to do, just die on point, or if you're really, 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 really sure you can get out, then get out. Otherwise, just die on point, right? Like the people you really care about getting out is like a high charge Zarya. Like if you have a high charge Zarya, right, then like sure, you maybe want to try and get out. And your team can like int and whatnot to try and like save your Zarya or save your president, okay? Now, like, I'll classify a little bit, like, what I mean, I guess, by, like, fight is over, so it's a bit clearer. So to me, when a fight is over, right, it is when you are, like, plus, like, 3, sorry, plus 4, yikes, plus 4 or more. Plus 3 to me isn't even. Like, when you're plus 4 in a fight, then to me, it's probably over. That's, like, when you can start alt-tracking and start doing stuff, like, and whatnot. When you're plus 4, so if you're plus 1, plus 2, that fight's not over. Doesn't mean you won. The enemy team could turn. They could use ultimates and they could turn the fight, right? But when you're like plus 4, yes, okay, that fight's probably won, right? Because you're up so much. And like what I mean by plus is that's like the difference between, you know, your team. It's not, it doesn't mean like for example, if you only have 2 people alive, right, and like they have 0, that's like plus 2, right? So like, I mean, yes, you've won this because there's people alive, but like it's still scary, right? Because it was like before maybe like a 2v2, right, and this fight's still happening. Like to me, if you have 6, it's a 6v6, and then all of a sudden, you know, you turn into a 6v2, this fight's probably over now because it's a plus 4. Okay, so that's the definition of to me what a fight is over is what it means. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna show some examples now from like a scrim that I got permission for to use. So we're gonna look at this scrim and sort of see some examples of, you know, when essentially a team is like, you know, down, but they still manage to turn it. So for example, we're looking at this fight here. Okay, we're looking at blue team. Okay, so blue team's playing. They're not fully playing this comp right, and they fix it after. And the reason why is sort of the Winston is sort of playing wrong, but the next fight they fix it. So the enemy team walks up, takes space, right? The Winston jumps in, they try and look for like a pinch play. And they pressure, Zarya dies, right? And that's like huge. Then the Winston dies. So right now they're even, right? Echo dies, so now they're down 1, right? So now they're actually down technically. And like it's a really weird situation. You can think about it on top of that. There's like a Winston going on a Brig and like they're really split. So like if you think about it, like blue team should probably lose here. Like you should probably lose, right? But now you can sort of see what happens, right? So Fofi starts playing like really slow and passive, right? He looks to like sort of like play very slow, look to pressure. The whole team plays around our Zarya, looks to poke, right? Our Ana gets a great kill on their Tracer, right? The Brig is sort of playing the Primal Winston, and the enemy Winston goes on the Ana. The sleep happens, which is great on our Ana. Our Zarya is kiting, right? Our Tracer sees an opportunity to push the Zen, right? And look to get that kill. Now the Tracer and Zen are dead. The Zarya looks to go back and peel for our backline so our backline doesn't die. So then the Zarya actually ends up killing the Echo that committed on our Ana, right? So our Zarya is peeling just in case our backline doesn't die here, and then our Tracer is going for the enemy team's backline, right, to try and get kills or at least pressure the enemy team's backline. And now you see like Aspect end up getting 2 off that, right? And then Fofi gets value 2, and then all of a sudden they win. Right? That's like pretty crazy to think about it, right? They were in a really weird situation. Their backline was being pressured, right? Aspect saw a perfect opportunity to go split pressure and pressure their backline. And then our Zarya, Fofi saw like, okay, we need to like keep our backline alive, so I'm gonna peel. So in this mid fight, they did a really good job of like understanding like how to like look for like opportunities to trade and also make sure that they live. Let's look at another one. Sleeping Tower. I don't know how to that, but I will ban. Okay, so here, right? Just watch this first fight here. Ana dies, so they're already down like, you know, sort of their main healer or like in poke phase. The Winston's really low, right? The Winston dies. Now they're down 2. Okay, so now they realize they're down 2, and they're like, okay, this is really, really, really awkward. We're down 2. But if I had their comms, they'd be saying this is still winnable. This is still winnable, right? You know, like how, like still winnable. And right now, if you think about it, what they're thinking in their head is like, we need to play for Zarya because Zarya is their mid-fight carry. So what they're doing is they play in this sort of enclosed area where the enemy team can't really cleanly push, right? Because you've got a Brig Zarya, and then they look to punish enemy over aggression, right? For example, this is like this ball, this is Zarya, right? They'll look to punish them for overcommitting and like over pushing. Remember how we talked about when you're, you know, up 2, it doesn't mean you over push, right? Red team is like up 2 and like they're pushing a lot when they really shouldn't. Like they should look to like push the people that are like outside and whatnot, not like to push inside because they can die, they can get traded. So you look here, what happens? This ball gets stunned, right? This ball is really low. Our Zarya is getting pocketed, uses bubble really well. Their Zarya gets forced out. Our Tracer's pressuring ball, like is 1 HP. We end up killing the Tracer 2 who pushed. Ball is 1, then we kill ball, and now all of a sudden, right, we win. You'll see this fight plays out and we'll win. When there's like, if you logically think about it, like the red team was up 2, right? And the other way to think about this too is if you live for a while, right, and you get trades and you kill those trades, the people coming back from spawn, like because your team died first, right? They'll come back from spawn first, so you'll actually have a 6v4, right? Like very soon, as long as you live and maybe get 1 or 2 kills. If you even get 1 kill, right, you can have a 6v5 soon. Right, it's just a matter of like living and like playing these important places on map, right? This is an enclosed area that's like really important because the enemy team can't really push in here, right? The other important place is probably around here in this situation, in like a mid fight. So like understanding how to like control the space that like values, you know, the fight, if you're down, and how to live. So let me talk about like important places on the map and like sort of understanding that like, hey, oh, we're up 2, like we want to sort of play a little bit slow, but we want to make sure we also control space so they can't like turn it. With angles or something. So let's look at here. Let's grab this. Okay, so let's look at Rialto. Everyone should know this example. It's a very, very basic example. Or sorry, not Rialto, Havana. So Havana is like a very interesting map, right? And everyone knows that like the most important part on this map is this high ground, right? Like this is like what you want to try and control, right? Like if you're up 2 or 3 and you just push main here and the enemy team controls this high ground, right? What's gonna happen is you could get flanked by like snipers or something, and then you could just end up losing, right? So when you're up, you know, 1 or 2 or whatnot, you should make sure you send people up here and then take this high ground. Then you have the high ground plus the main lane. Whoops, send people to take this high ground, and then you can look to pinch people, right? And this is like an obvious one. This is sort of an example of like an important place on the map that you need to understand that, hey, we need to look to control this or at least pressure this. If we don't control or pressure this, right, then we're giving the enemy team a lot of like the enemy team's gonna be able to pressure us a lot, and we can't really do much about it. Another like area obviously you want to control is sort of like this truck area. So like around here, the space is like important to hold. This is like a very important place to soft hold if you're looking to hit early. But yeah. Let me give you some more examples. Okay. I'm trying to think of what that would be. Dorado's good. We'll use oops, that's not what I wanted. Use Dorado. So Dorado's like a very good one too, right? Like if you just think about it, when you're playing close, right, or when you're defending or attacking, there's like 2 sort of sets of places that are important. The enemy team is holding close, they will look to be normally holding this. Okay. And the other thing I want to clarify too is the important places on map depend on what types of comps are being played. For instance, like if you're playing like Brawl, right? Brawl is gonna favor chokes more, right? So you'd like favor like this corner here and this here, right? But if you're playing like more like slow comps, whoops, like more spam or like slow comps, where you look to like hit more in like open space, then you're gonna favor like angles, obviously, and like high grounds. So like in this situation, right, like red is like if they wanted to play like a spam comp or like a slower comp. And the blue, so that's if you want to play close, right? The blue would be if you want to play further back. It'd be like this. So the blue kill box would be something around here. Just like the kill box. And the red kill box or like engagement zone would be somewhere around like here. Like that. Right? And these are like the important places on the map that you would expect people to try and like hold if they were on defense, right? So on attack, you need to look to pressure them out or look to take it yourself so you can pressure them. So for instance, right? Like most people think, oh, okay, you know, I need to like take this high ground over here. Color. Like I need to take this high ground over here from them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, you know, go all the way down here and like push this, which is really rough because you normally get hit here, right? And you're doing that because the enemy team has this important place and you want to prevent them from having it. Well, the way to think about it is, okay, how do you approach this important place on the high ground? How do you look to push it? How do you look to like, you know, like pressure it or whatnot? Obviously, yes, you could soft engage it, but that still lets them have it. The other way of looking at it is, okay, let's like do a rotation over here, take this space. From this space over here, we can pressure them while also supporting cart, right? So you can find like spaces that you want to take that'll help you push the enemy team when they're playing like an important place on the map to help you even take this spot, or else like also help you like push cart to like where you want. Right? Let's look at like the second part of point. So the second part of this point, right? It's here. So you know if you're playing Brawl, right, you'd look to probably play this choke, right? But if you're not playing Brawl, it's really, really, really awkward. Like if you're playing Double Bubble, or like something like slower, right? It's really awkward to like put your Winston over here because where's your backline gonna play? Your backline doesn't really want to play here, right? Like backline, like I'll do a B for backline. Your backline doesn't really want to play here. Your backline doesn't really want to like they can maybe play here, but it's like still not that optimal. Backline definitely doesn't want to play here. This they could play, but it's an open space. It's awkward. Hence, your backline actually, believe it or not, really wants to play over here and control like this area. Because again, it's enclosed, so they can like absorb really well. They can have good rotations, right? And like based off what happens, so like they'd want to play here, which means the Winston would want to actually play further back, like maybe like over here or just further back, and then from there they can look. The Winston can look for options. Maybe the Winston can come over here. Winston can like come closer and like soft engage and jump out. So it gives more options, right? So here, believe it or not, the important place to actually pressure is this area over here, right? Which probably Tracer's maybe holding this lane too, right? So you'll need to find a way to like pressure this. And for like backlines and like understanding that, hey, this is the important place I want to take, right? Then when you're on defense, right, you're pressured. Maybe from here you realize you need to back up and then play here, stabilize, live, right? And then if they push you in here, then you can punish them. Another example of like an important place on second, right, is almost everyone knows that this high ground is like if you're looking at like this part of the map, this high ground is super important, right? Everyone says like this is like a very, very important high ground. But if you're playing here, believe it or not, the other really, really important high ground is this, because this gives this angle, this gives this, and both these angles sort of support each other in a way, right? So again, like understanding, okay, the enemy team could be here. I need to pressure that angle, or I need to look to go take that angle so that we can take space. Okay, and like I'm not gonna go too much more into it, but hopefully you should sort of get the idea. I'll look at like one more map. Um, uh, Hollywood we could. So like Hollywood, the important place on first point. Like if you're in a mid fight, if you're in a mid fight situation, your backline pushes through this choke, right, and you pressure the enemy team, and they all like kite into here, right, because everyone knows, this spot is really good. This spot is really good, and like obviously here is really good, right? And the enemy team kites into here, and your backline's sort of chilling in this open area, which is really risky because enemy tracers could push you or like people could hit you. Your backline should say, okay, you know what? Instead, I'm gonna like rotate and come over here and play over here, and then your front line can sort of just chill outside and like pressure these guys, and now your backline's set up in a better position. while you're also, like pressuring point and your backline's helping, right? Again, if you're playing Brawl, it'd be different because you probably just look to play chokes and choke them out. But if you're playing Spam, you want to look to set up your backline in a position where they could like help your team, or maybe even dive again. You'd want to rotate your backline in position in an important place where they could help your team and they can like look to live and control space and apply pressure. Okay, so hopefully this concept of like important space on the map like makes sense, and like based off your compositions, you sort of understand like as a backline or even like a front line, like so front line, I don't need to over push, right? Like I'm just gonna wait for a second, like we're up 1 or 2, just gonna live here, right? Like I'm gonna like chill outside, apply pressure, let my backline rotate, right? Make sure we don't lose anyone. My backline set up even more now, even more pressure. Great, we're forcing point. They have to do something. If they don't do something, then like it's gonna be rough. Okay. Uh, so that should sort of explain, when you're like, up 1 or down 1, right? Like when you're down, you'd look to kite in the cafe in that example, and then look to live, hope the enemy team pushes into you. If they don't, then you play slow, you stabilize, and you maybe look to push out for a play. Your tracer maybe looks to like hit the back line. Again, like there's a lot of options and stuff. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about is this. So like one of the biggest things I think a lot of teams have with is like OT situations, right? Where like, everyone's just fighting, everyone's just fighting, everyone's just fighting, and like it gets really crazy and a lot of things are happening. Um and it just gets like target focus, right, is like questioned, right? Um like positioning and is like questioned. The next thing I'm going to say is honestly, people concept of just living is questioned. People go too aggressive, don't understand that they just need to live. So like the biggest thing I'm gonna say first is I'm just gonna talk about like the target focus aspect, right? And like I'm gonna give this like sort of a list, right? And like it'll hopefully paint a picture of like what priorities are and like what's important to call when you're in these situations. But it's not something where it's like you have to follow this, like this is you have to, right? But it'll give you an idea of like what sort of is like important to focus. Okay. So on top is like your discorded target, and your discorded target is normally based off everything that is below. So it's discorded target. Then it is one tap heroes. Most of you guys know how annoying Doomfist is. Doomfist, you could even say sort of Widow. You could say Reaper, right? The next would be like a target with an important alt. For example, their Zarya is coming back with Grav. Like you probably need to like deal with that Zarya, and that alt could be their win condition. WC win con. There's a 1 HP target. Next thing is like whoops, a high charge something. Like so high charge Zarya or Sim. You want to, deal with those as well. Then like sometimes like I was talking to some team and they were like Lucio, because like Lucio, if he stays on the fight too long, he'll build beat and he just becomes annoyance, and he also heals everything. So like Lucio sort of something you want to get rid of. Then I'd say out of position target. And then the last thing I always say, and this is like what people should almost always should default to, right? If you don't know, and I'm gonna put it in different colors, it's really obvious. Is a easy to kill target. That is defined by something that is big and in your face. It's also defined as something that is non-mobile, right? And yeah. So for example, like Hog, Diva with no fly, Winston with no jump, Reinhardt. These like things that are like really big and in your face that you can just everyone can see instantly, instead of doing 180s or like 360s around for like a Tracer or a Lucio, right? Like these are like very nice, right? And normally like all of this, right, is like based off that, right? So like the discorded target your Zen normally has is like based off like sort of this list, if that makes sense. And the next thing I'm going to add that I think is really, really, really important that people don't seem to understand, but it is kill point and stay on point. Don't go chase somebody. It's in Narnia. Just focus point and kill point. Okay, it's like super, 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 super important. Okay. So that's sort of like positioning. The biggest thing I talk about positioning is like sort of that mid fight concept. I'll maybe give an example. Uh, when basically like when you're up a lot, right? And like let's say you start like you start losing people, then it's really important you guys play to like live, and maybe you give space, right? In like the mid fight concepts where like you're down one or two, you give space, bait the enemy team to walk more forward, right? And you punish them if they walk forward, if you can, and then you punish them, your spawns come back, and then you look to push back in, right? So this concept of like you can give space, or the other concept also with positioning of sort of saying like if someone says this is like annoys me so much. If someone says I can touch, don't have three people go touch the cart. If your tracer says I can touch, ball shouldn't go touch the cart and just feed all charge and just die, right? So if someone says I can touch, trust that person to touch, listen, right, and then go. So like you abuse the fact that you have like Tracer. Tracer can go blink in the stall point with cool blink formations, and then like recall, and then Tracer can just get CDs, and then your Winston can touch and get a lot of value out of Slam, and something like an Echo can follow up on that Slam, and you can maybe get a kill, right? Because they're so focused on the Tracer, then all of a sudden the ball comes in, like whoa, where did this ball come from? And then Squishy is whoa Echo, right? Like it can go a lot better for you, but you need to listen and then understand that people can stall, let them stall, okay? And that sort of goes in the fact with living. So this is sort of an example of like, understanding like mid-fight stuff, right? Like sort of understanding like, how to flip fights. Because I think it's so important people understand that you can flip fights, right? And this concept, like this sort of like even goes into, and I'll briefly talk about, is what's called ebb and flow, right? Like ebb and flow is like a very, very, very like not basic, I guess, but it was a very fundamental concept of how fights work, right? Where at a very high level, right, like just because you're down one or down two in a mid fight, you can even use alts to turn fights, right? And I'll give you like some examples. Um, let's see, I have my dedicated clip here that I use for this. So I'm not gonna play it, but it's gonna be weird because you're gonna see two of me. But this is from like a very long time ago. So how ebb and flow works is like one team has the tempo advantage, right, and then the other team pushes back in. And another way I like to describe ebb and flow, right, is if anyone ever played goats, right? If you played goats and both teams had rally, what would happen is like let's say there's team 1 and team 2, both teams have rally, team 1 pushes with rally and goes in, team 2 would say ha ha ha, okay, you're rallying me from really far away, I am going to back up. They would back up, right? And now this would look something along the lines of team 1 being here with rally, right? And then team 2 would be like maybe like over here, right? And then team 2 would sort of wait for team 1 to maybe get close, and then team 2 then would push back in with rally, right, when that team 1's rally is over, and try and get value. So it's sort of this concept of like push and pull. Like this person's pushing in, backing up, like because this person's pushing in, is backing up to like live the push. The person gets really close, and then the other person pushes in, and then they try and back up, and it's sort of this flow, right? And if you sort of see this example here, it sort of shows it really well. So here, Defiance pushing in. They use Crealt. Sort of see they just used it, and that forces fusions back. And now there's a wall, there's a slam. Okay. Right over here, alarm hits like a god tier anti. Right. So and it doesn't just have to be nades. It doesn't have to be alts. It can be CDs too. Right. So here, like Beast gets naded and Agilities gets naded, so Beast is forced to play slow now. So like now all of a sudden now this tempo shifts into Fusion's favor where they can push and Defiant is forced to back up. So now Defiant backs up. And now you see like Fusion pushing really, really hard, right? But then Divine says, you know what? You're pushing me? I don't care anymore. I'm going to push back. You're giving me one punch, I'm going to punch you with two. So then Defiant says, you know what? We're down 2 or 3. Probably didn't expect them that many people to die. But they said, you know what? It's still winnable. We're going to beat here, right? So Defiant looks for a beat and shatter and hopes to like get a massive shatter, right, with the beat, and looks to try and push back and turn the flow of the fight. Let's watch here. Now Defiant pushes back with this beat. Shatter, which will take a second. right? It's a massive shatter, right? And then they try and kill something, right? But then Fusion says, ha ha ha, you think you think you can still kill me, right? Even with this massive beat, I'm not gonna give you a chance. I'm gonna counter beat, right? So there's a counter beat in Nano just to make sure they win because it's last fight. And now they push back in with the beat in Nano. This one's sort of like more of a peel alt, right? But it also helps them push too because they have advantage. And now Fusion pushes in, Carpe flanks the Deadeye, and they just end up winning, right? And this is sort of the concept of push and pull and ebb and flow at a really high level. Guys, it's like another way of looking at mid fights. Okay, so that should hopefully explain ebb and flow. Feel free to like DM me on Discord if you have questions. And yes, hopefully that was useful and you guys learned a lot.